Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we are going to be giving an update on Hurricane Idalia and as it approaches the state of Florida, what kind of impacts we're going to be seeing here just in the next, like say, less than 24 hours, right? Like this storm, like even next, I would say in the next 12 hours, we're really going to start seeing this thing kick into gear, especially in Florida and southern Georgia, and it will not be long before it makes its way into the Carolinas. So as always, to stay up to date with the latest weather content, be sure to like and subscribe as it does help the channel out. And we're just going to get right into it here, starting off with the sea surface temperatures that this thing is sitting over. And this is why you're seeing that rapid intensification, right? 88 degrees sea surface temperatures right now. And not only that, it did just move over a very warm current that has deep, warm ocean water, right? Because not only is it warm on the surface, as I talked about before, the water is deep when you go down in elevation into the water, which is an even bigger source of fuel for these storms. So that current, which is a pretty deep current here, I actually forget the name of the current, but I know it's what is connected to the Gulf Stream that does go up the East Coast. Right, so it just moved over that. It's really strengthening, and it will continue to say over the next 12 hours before its landfall. And this thing has got room to be a major hurricane, right? It's only 11 miles an hour in terms of wind strength away from a Cat 3, and it's honestly 30 miles an hour off of a Cat 4. All right, so we'll see what happens with the 8 o'clock update, which at the time of recording is about 90 minutes. So I decided to go with the 5 o'clock update for this video, which is, the major when they released the new advisory and they released all the new maps. So that's the more major update. But you can see 88, and as it makes its way to the north, it might run into some 89-degree waters before making landfall. But one thing to note here is that the water is more shallow. And we're talking about that, what that means here. So the more shallow water, right? It's obviously not conducive for a hurricane to move over, right? Because you really, again, you want that deep water, for the hurricane to really fuel off of. But at the same time, that shallow water and the shape of the coastline and the Big Bend region is really making it prone to storm surge. So it's almost like a double-edged sword here, right? We're gonna have a big storm like this. We're gonna have a lot of wind. We're gonna have a lot of water, right? You're gonna take a look at the surge values in just a minute here. Continuing with the what the winds look like, higher up in the atmosphere, right? Notice how well stacked the storm is, right? Now, this is not the winds at the surface. Now, these are winds 250 millibars up, right? We're talking like thousands and thousands of feet up. Notice how the upper level winds are rotating around the storm as well, meaning the storms and the storm center itself are all very well stacked, right? You don't see winds going across it. That would be evidence of wind shear and, disorganization, right? But you just see even around the system in general, you just see winds going around in a counterclockwise rotation, right? Just like with at the surface. So that is an indicator that the wind shear is not very high, or if at all. So that's a bad sign in terms of it's going to be able to strengthen more. But you can see in general, right, the upper level winds are pointing this way, so that's where the storm is most likely to be headed. Now up to the north, and eventually will turn off to the northeast and east. All right, so I want to take a look at Cedar Key, Florida, real quick. Take a look at those tide tables. So our high tide here tomorrow morning is going to be 2:35 in the morning, with a high tide of 3.5 feet, and then our 1:45 p.m. high tide, which has a higher tide of 4.7 feet. All right, so taking a look at that, and then taking a look at what the winds are going to look like around that time. So you can see here. So this is 11 a.m. Now I would take the wind values here with a grain of salt. We know how strong the winds are. The modeling is, of course, being a little bit funky. Even the high-resolution model, which is surprising. Wind gust will not be 42 miles an hour. Wind gust will be much higher than that. But, the point is we're going to have a strong – I wanted to show this so you can see we're still going to have that strong onshore push into a place like Cedar Key around their higher high tide, right? You saw it 4.7 feet first. I think it was the 3.5. So the worst high tide, and we're still going to have that onshore flow. And it's going to be there for hours and hours, and that's going to be piling up water as well. Now, I know we usually get into the modeling later on in the video, and we still are. This is just to show you, again, what I'm talking about, because the relative humidity map shows this pretty well. If I zoom in here, notice these sticks, right? I call them sticks. How they're rotating around the storm, right? And even if you get really close, if you look really closely in that center, right, this storm is really well stacked, even at the upper levels. And that means it is organized. That means there's no shear. That means it's going to continue to strengthen again over the next 12 hours up until its landfall. So I'd say major hurricane status looks likely at this point. I think at least so it's category 3. Category 4, Not quite so sure. Okay, so because it is accelerating, it's moving at 16 miles an hour now to the north. Um, and so of course it's going to give it less time to strengthen, or as opposed to moving slower, right? But that that storm coming in with that momentum could make the wind impact worse, right? Because it's coming in with a bunch of momentum. Like the storms are moving fast, the winds are, right? The winds are accelerating, right? So that's going to be a problem as well, right? Like that was a problem with Isaias back in 2020, right? When the storm kind of just went up like this, it was moving at like 30 miles an hour. I was right in the path of it, right? Because it was moving so fast, there was so much wind power, there was so much energy with it, and it caused a lot of wind damage. Now the rain might have not lasted too long, but there was still a lot of rain. And that's going to be true for this one, even though it's going to be moving like half the speed that Isaias did, because I think it was moving, that was booking it. This won't be moving that fast, but still 15 miles an hour is, I would say, slightly above average in terms of speed, right, as it continues to make its turn off the southeast coast. All right, so let's get into the National Hurricane Center's graphics here. You can see winds is now category 2 at the time of recording this. 100 mile per hour sustained winds, gust to 120, pressure down to 972. We're going to be taking a look at reconnaissance data. They're flying through the storm as I speak, so I'm keeping it a little bit later on just so we can wait to see when they keep flying through. The storm is moving to the north, but expect that northeast and eventually northeast bend pretty soon. Now, major hurricane 115. Now, if you're looking at the last advisory, okay, we take a look at that real quick. Yes, it does say here 125, but that's because on the 11 a.m. advisories they issue it for, like you see it says 8 a.m., 8 p.m., etc., etc. All right, so you can also see the storm location was closer to the coast, right? So now in the newest advisory, right, it's shown all the way down here at 115. So again, do know it will be making more, it will be strengthening at least by a little bit more before it makes its landfall. But it's still over very warm water, even though it won't be that shallow. Also, look at the tropical storm force wind field. Now, do keep in mind, while this is not on land yet, do know that, again, we'll get into this soon as well, showing the radar, there are bands moving through that are producing these tropical storm force winds, even though that wind core with the widespread tropical storm force winds is still offshore, but that'll be coming onshore, and this will be ever growing, by the way, as Idalia strengthens and makes its way onshore. We take a look at the rainfall here. Big areas. I mean, from Hatteras to, not far away from Wilmington, right? Augusta, Georgia, down to Tallahassee. This pretty much constant area of 6 to 10 inches of rain, even how fast this thing is moving, should alert you enough, right? That's a lot of rainfall, and especially because it's moving fast, it's coming in a short period of time. All right, Wilmington, North Carolina, 4 to 6 inches, 2 to 4 inches for Charleston, right? Even Orlando, 2 to 4 inches of rain, even though the storm is all the way over here. So big deal here, right? In terms of the rainfall. Now, if that upper level low that we were talking about before, like in past videos, was still potent, right? And it was enough, and it was bringing some shear, this way, a lot of those impacts, those storms would actually be blown. These storms would be blown off to the east. So actually, a place like Orlando and the east coast of Florida actually should be thankful that there was no wind shear to push it over there, right? And that would also made the storm weaker, but it would have pushed the impacts further east. But yes, widespread area of 4 to 6 and even 6 to 10 inches of rain is also pretty widespread in these areas, leading to a moderate flash flood risk. Again, from Wilmington to Augusta down to Tallahassee. Not quite along the coast, but just inland, it's going to be the area of heaviest rain. But at the coast, even South Carolina, Georgia, we will have some pretty high surge values. We're going to get into those in just a second. All right, so tropical storm force wind probabilities. All right, you can see pretty much right here, pretty much Orlando, Tampa down to Sarasota. That's like you have above a 50-50 shot at this point of tropical storm force winds. We'll go to most likely time of arrival here. Pretty much 2 a.m. Wednesday, right? So when the storm is not too far away. And then 8 a.m. Wednesday will be like around Jacksonville. Savannah, you'll get those winds by 2 p.m. Wednesday. Charleston by late Wednesday evening. Wilmington, North Carolina by Thursday morning at 8 a.m. And it's just gonna make its way off the coast and hang out there. All right, it's gonna slow down a lot. Right, so if you didn't notice on the map here, I really didn't emphasize it too much. But if you look at this is September 1st. So this is, I believe, Friday. Yeah, at 2 p.m. Okay, and then if we go to the next point, this is 2 p.m. Saturday. Yeah, it literally moved from here to here in a full day. In 20 4 hours. So yeah, that's pretty troubling. But even worse, here's 2 p.m. Saturday. It goes here by 2 p.m. Sunday. So this storm will slow down excessively once it makes its way off the coast. It's going to bend to the east southeast, and we're not really sure where it goes after that. Right now, we're just speculating at this point because some modeling say it's going to turn back towards Florida, even though it'll be in a very weakened state. It could still move towards Florida. It could just swirl around here and go out to sea. It could, it basically there's like anything's a possibility at this point in terms of that. But again, just focusing on the impacts right now, there are tropical storm warnings. I know they only put it on the coastline because that's how they show it, but there are tropical storm warnings over pretty much this entire region now. Jacksonville down to Melbourne, Orlando, Lakeland, Gainesville. I believe Gainesville might be even be in a hurricane watch. We've got storm surge watches here from Savannah to Charleston. Tropical storm warnings going up the coast to Wilmington, and even the Hatteras region is in a tropical storm watch. All right, so far-reaching impacts here with this system. All right, so let's go now to the hurricane force wind probabilities, which are going to be pretty much confined here to southern Georgia and northern Florida. All right, it's a good 50-50 shot here, but I think this probability will go up once the storm arrives. So as long as you're in this like lighter green or yellow or red, whatever it may be, you will probably see hurricane force winds. Of course, the probabilities will go up once the storm gets closer. Key messages: catastrophic impact, storm surge inundation of, spoiler alert, I was going to show you, but 10 to 15 feet above ground level. All right, and destructive waves are expected somewhere between Osceola River and Yankeetown, Florida. All right, so life-threatening surge inundation on the Gulf Coast where the storm surge warnings are, where the watches are, it's still going to be, it has the potential to be life-threatening, but not a guarantee, but still something to definitely be looking out for. Life-threatening winds, hurricane warnings, of course, are out there. Damaging hurricane force winds in areas of flash urban moderate river flooding with locally considerable impacts are expected across the Florida Big Bend, central Georgia, and South Carolina through eastern North Carolina later tonight, and then all the way through Thursday. All right, so let's take a look here at the surge map, and I thought I had the other one pulled up as well, so I'll pull that up real quick. Here is the peak surge forecast. All right, and you can see we have there's your Yankeetown to Osceola River. I believe that does include Cedar Key. 10 to 15 feet of surge flooding. Okay, Tampa Bay even has 4 to 6 feet. All right, and then even towards Apalachicola, Indian Pass, 3 to 5 feet. All right, you can see it's like 3 to 5, 4 to 7, 7 to 11. Like just going a little bit east will change your surge values by a lot. I would say Tybee Island, Savannah, Charleston, 2 to 4 feet of surge. Even southern regions of the Hatteras, not too far away from Wilmington. We could even see 2 to 4 feet, all the way up to northern, right off the coast of Cape Hatteras, 1 to 3 feet. Right, even down to northeastern Florida, the Keys, 1 to 2 feet. So yeah, still a lot of surge here. I mean, it's still a lot of flooding. I mean, think about just a foot of water, right, which is the lowest end of this graph. Though a foot of water is still a lot, plus rainwater. So imagine now, 10 to 15 feet, right, which is as tall as some houses, plus rainwater. It's not going to be a pretty sight. Especially if it combines with high tide, that's going to make it even worse. But if we look at the surge inundation map, I wanted to take a look at this so that you could see what we're talking about here, this kind of coastline that we're going to be seeing. I mean, look how far inland this goes. Okay? If you look towards the bottom left of your screen, you see like that mileage indicator. If you were like to put your 2 fingers, okay, that would be like 10 miles from that end to that end, and then try and mirror that to the best of your ability. Right, we're talking like, I mean, this is pretty much 10 miles inland. I mean, that is, if not a little bit more. So because of just like this like coastline, that like flat, shallow coastline, I believe there's even some marshland here. I believe we're near. Are we near Cedar? I think we are near Cedar Key on this area. But yeah, and that's just how far inland that red represents more than 9 feet of surge. I mean, the lighter amounts of surge still go well inland. So yeah, this is the kind of flooding we're going to be talking about here, going all the way inland, even by as much as 10 miles, right? And that happens a lot with these major hurricanes, right? Because the flooding goes really far inland, right? In areas where the coastline is maybe not shaped like that, maybe not as bad, but keep in mind with Tampa Bay, first of all, over 3 feet of saltwater flooding, of course, is bad. Notice this pretty much covers all of Clearwater Beach and Island. I know there's a road that goes down this island. I forget what the road name is. But I mean, this goes inland as well into proper Tampa as well. So yeah, this is definitely not looking good here for the west coast of Florida. even though you're not in the direct path, even though you are outside the cone, even though the landfall will probably be somewhere around here, you could be seeing impacts all the way down into Tampa and St. Pete, right? And even down to Fort Myers. We can even see a couple of feet of storm surge there as well. So let's take a look at the satellite here. I mean, look at this thing. Now, I am actually going to refresh this real quick, just so we get the latest there. And you can see like the convection now is really building. It's flaring, in fact, along the storm center here. And if you look, if you were to look at the radar earlier, you could see even some lightning forming around the eye wall, which means strong thunderstorms are forming. Yeah, this thing is definitely intensifying. I would honestly, if I had to estimate, I would say by the 8 o'clock update, I would say we're at about 105 to 110 miles per hour. And then it could get even stronger than that by the time we get into the overnight hours. So yes, we got a very strong system here building, and you can even see some convection that even moved through Orlando here. You know, the Space Coast of Florida. I mean, this thing is just really building up. I mean, that flaring of convection around the center, I could just watch that all day. Now, one thing I do notice, and again, this could be because it's on infrared satellite, although I think with Franklin it was easily visible. Maybe we'll take a look at the visible next to see if we can see it better. It's just that the eye, it's not really visible, right? Like I can clearly tell, and I'm sure you can clearly tell where the eye is, right? There's not as, deep convection. You can see where the eye is clearly, but usually you're supposed to be able to see through to the surface. You're supposed to be able to see like pretty much gray like you do where there's no convection, right? So that is one thing, right? And I mean, it's definitely not an eye wall replacement cycle because that usually happens once it's been a Cat 4 or once it like strengthens fast. Sometimes it needs some time to recalibrate. Well, that's not happening here. It just really hasn't formed a clear, concise eye yet, but there is still one kind of, and you can in the aspect of you can still identify where it is. But the flare up of convection around the eye wall, around the eye on the eye wall, is something to be concerned about, of course. Look at the visible satellite. Yeah, you can see, you can tell where it is, but you can't really see to the ground. But that flare up of convection, so look how it just flares up and then all of a sudden just poof spreads out. That's a sign that these storms are really bursting and they're expanding, and this storm is just growing and breathing. Okay, you can even see over land we got some thunderstorms spinning up. I mean, or popping up, whatever you want to call it, bursting. All right. I mean, just beautiful to see on the satellite. And again, this will most likely get stronger as the sun goes down as we head into the evening. Why? Because the atmosphere is going to be cooling down some. And of course, you got the warm, moist air in the hurricane, and the cooler air in the region is only going to create more instability and get stronger thunderstorms and a stronger storm in general. So that is something to keep in mind, of course. You can see even the bands, right, around the system, like these lighter clouds forming. I mean, everything is just rotating perfectly, right? Even got good outflow. This thing is really breathing and getting its act together. Not like it was in the Caribbean, that's for sure. Now, we take a look at the radar, though. Interestingly enough, when you look, and I was looking at this earlier too, which is why one of the reasons I said you can clearly see the eye, because if you look on the radar, there apparently isn't anything, like the eye is there. Like there's no precipitation in that eye. So it could just honestly be a satellite issue, but you should be able to see it on satellite normally. So it's definitely a more raggedy eye, but there's an eye there nonetheless. And there's that northeastern quadrant where the heaviest of the convection is of those storms. But even these bands, I mean, get some pretty high DBZs, right? Some stronger storms in these bands as well, right? We just had one, as I just showed you on the satellite, move through Orlando. That is moving its way to the north, so still a pretty big system. And I think eventually what's going to happen is this eye, you got an eye here. I think this will eventually grow, and this will all become an eye. At least that's how it's starting to look, right? And then the storm could grow even more. So that's something that is a possibility, right? Just based on like how we're seeing like a bracing cloud cover here. It's maybe trying to form a bigger eye, right? So maybe not an eye wall replacement, but an eye wall development. Maybe it's supposed to develop a new eye wall. I don't know. This storm is definitely interesting and unprecedented, that is for sure. But yeah, storms already moving through Orlando and the Palm Coast and Gainesville, all of course very concerning. And we've got the NOAA 3 flight that is flying through right now, and here's the data that they've gathered. Okay, so around 2138, I would say even maybe around 2143 Z, which I do believe is around around 548 or 648 actually. So not too long ago, all right, they did pick up that big drop in pressure down to as low as I think the low as like 965 millibars. So this thing is definitely strengthening, and we did pick up winds of about a spike up to 85 knots there. So still some pretty strong winds, right? But definitely a drop in pressure, which will eventually lead to that strengthening in wind, right? So if you take a look here, you can see 968 is what they found there in the center of the storm, right? And even at flight level, picking up winds of 100, 110 knots. But of course, it's at flight level, but that's still a sign of strengthening. And again, this thing's got another 12 hours to go until landfall. All right, at least. It could even be a little bit more than that. But yeah, that's something that the hurricane hunters have found so far. Of course, if something does change, of course, we'll update later on in the video. If we do go back here for a second, you can see, yeah, the 85 knots. Yeah, that's about 100 miles an hour. So that's pretty in line with what we've been seeing. But that spike is something to take note of. And of course, that drop in pressure, which could lead to an eventual increase in wind in the short term. But yes, around 5:45 or so is when they found that. Anywhere between 965 and 968 millibars of pressure. Which we go back to their main page so we can see the pressure at which they found it. Yeah, 960 or 972. So definitely dropping in pressure, and it is a sign of strengthening. All right, let's take a look at the models, right? So pretty much in agreement around the Big Bend region for landfall, going up through southeast Georgia, pretty much going through Charleston, South Carolina, going south of Wilmington, North Carolina, and then where it goes from there is where the disagreement happens. Does it turn towards Florida? Does it just go out to sea? Does it go towards Halifax, Nova Scotia? All possibilities with these models right now. Right, you see reflected here in the GEFS and the GEPS. I mean, one's even saying it could just completely stall out and just go back into the Gulf. I know the GFS, spoiler alert, had a going out like this and then going through Florida, going back towards Texas as a much weakened system, but still there nonetheless, right? The DNA, if you will. All right, so here we are. Now, when these model intensity guidances were made, it was still a Cat 1. Of course, now it's a Cat 2. Not many saying it's going to get to a Cat 3, but I personally think it will. And, of course, dropping to a tropical storm in the next 36 hours, of course, as it makes its way over land and, of course, off to the north and east. And, yeah, staying a tropical storm for another few days or so at least after that. All right, so wrap up the tail end of the video. Let's get into some modeling, right? NAM 12KM, we're going to be using higher resolution modeling now that we're closer to the arrival of the storm. You can see making its way onto the Big Bend region. You can still see banding making its way through the peninsula of Florida, and just the staggering amounts of rain that we're going to be seeing here through South Carolina and North Carolina as it makes its way off the coast. And even some lingering rain, little disturbance hanging through after that. So let's take a look at that rainfall total. And yeah, some patches, again, over 6 inches of rain, kind of similar to the National Hurricane Center map, except they had a little bit more widespread, but still 2 to 4 inches in that zone. I mean, in areas of 6 plus and pretty, I wouldn't say widespread, but consistent, right? So that's, of course, something to watch out for out in the short term. Let's take a look at the high resolution model, the 18Z model run, just because it goes out 2 days. Going to be the best one to look at. And you can see, again, as the low is coming on shore, you can see that onshore push that Tampa and Cedar Key are still getting. And while the convection they seem to think is going to be on the northwest side, so that could really put Tallahassee in danger. So it's like the east and west side thrown into danger. So usually it's just the northeast quadrant, but it could also be the north and northwest. I mean, it's not unprecedented to see that. Especially as it moves over land, becomes more of an extra tropical low. You start to see more of the convection now to the north of the center. Right? It's pretty typical with the storms that move over land here, right? And you can see it making its way off the coast. And still, again, your afternoon thunderstorms mixed with moisture from Idalia to give more thunderstorms to the state of Florida, especially the peninsula as we head into the afternoon on Thursday. So how much precipitation with the high resolution model? A much more widespread area of 6 to 10 inches, and even some localized areas getting a little over 10 inches. Georgia, South Carolina, Apalachicola, they think could even get over a foot of rain. So very, very dangerous amounts of rainfall and wind and surge all going to play a part here. And finally, the FE3, another high resolution model I like to look at here. You can see it coming in, looks like it's heading towards Apalachicola, that makes a right turn into the Big Bend region. A lot of banding in the peninsula of Florida. A lot of rain for Tallahassee and Savannah and Charleston and Wilmington as the storm makes its way to the north and east. And rainfall total is pretty similar to the high resolution model, maybe a little bit further to the south and east, but 6 to 10 with some spotty areas of over 10 inches of rain. And for those coastal areas where they could see 10 inches of rain and 10 to 15 feet of storm surge, I mean, like you're talking like 16 feet of water in some areas, and it could even be more than that. All right, especially if the storm gets a little bit stronger than expected. If it gets to a Cat 4, surge values could go up another at least 1 to 2 feet in addition. So definitely something I'm going to be keeping an eye on here. But thank you guys so much for watching this updated video. I am The Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, stay safe, stay prepared, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.